It is the end of 2025, and the Royal Navy has just completed its most ambitious carrier deployment in a generation. HMS Prince of Wales led a strike group across 8 months, reaching Japan and Australia, assembling 24 British F-35Bs at sea without borrowing a single aircraft from America. The first Sea Lord is talking about uncrewed warships, artificial intelligence, and redefining maritime military power. The headlines are good, the mood is confident, and the ceremonial photographs look excellent. The Royal Navy currently has 7 frigates. 7. A frigate is the workhorse of any serious naval force, the ship that escorts carriers, hunts submarines, shows the flag, and keeps sea lanes open. 7 frigates means that on any given day, once maintenance cycles and deployment rotations are accounted for, the number actually available for tasking sits considerably below that figure. Britain is simultaneously deploying its most powerful carrier strike group and running its smallest escort fleet in modern history, and that is not a rhetorical device. That is the operational situation as it stands. The question this video answers is a direct one. How does the Royal Navy go from here to genuinely lethal by 2030? The answer involves serious money, a completely rethought idea of what a warship actually is, and a submarine program that could reshape British maritime power for the next 50 years. Start with the problem, because it clarifies everything that follows. The threat environment the Royal Navy is building for has shifted faster than almost anyone predicted. Russia's actions in Ukraine confirmed something naval planners had theorized for years, but could no longer treat as hypothetical. Long-range precision strike is cheap, plentiful, and accurate enough to matter, which means a vessel considered adequately defended a decade ago now carries exposure that planners cannot ignore. China's Navy has expanded at a pace demanding attention from every serious maritime power, and the question of who controls the sea lanes that global trade moves along is no longer an academic one. It is the central geopolitical contest of the next 30 years, and Britain's position in that contest depends entirely on what it can put to sea, when, and with what capability. And that is where the story gets complicated. The origin of the problem the Navy is now solving did not arrive overnight, so it is worth understanding where it came from. The Type 23 frigate was designed in the 1980s for a Cold War that ended before most of them were even launched, built for a specific threat in a specific era with a specific service life in mind, roughly 20 years. The Royal Navy has been operating them for approximately twice that figure. When a warship runs significantly beyond its intended design life, the maintenance burden does not increase in a straight line. It compounds year on year, and every year a ship remains in service past its intended retirement is a year of engineering effort that could have been directed toward something new. Defense analysts have described the Type 23s as having maintenance headroom that is narrowing to the point of concern, which is the kind of careful language professionals use when they mean something considerably more direct. The replacement program, the Type 26 and Type 31 frigates, was designed to solve exactly this. The Type 31 contract with Babcock came in at £1.25 billion for 5 ships, roughly £250 million per vessel, which in the context of modern warship procurement is genuinely affordable. The Type 26 is heavier, more capable, and specifically engineered around submarine hunting, the mission Britain considers most critical, with 8 of those planned across the program. On paper, 13 frigates represents a real recovery of escort capacity, enough to restore operational flexibility and give commanders genuine options rather than a permanent shortage of hulls. The problem is the transition, and the transition is where 7 becomes the working number. Delivering all 13 ships runs to the mid-2030s at the earliest. The Type 23s are retiring now. The gap between the old ships leaving and the new ones arriving in sufficient numbers is not a planning abstraction. It is a live operational constraint, playing out in real time, while the threat environment continues to accelerate. The Navy is threading a needle with a thread that has very little slack left in it. Wait, it gets worse. Before the 2025 Strategic Defense Review was even published, the National Audit Office had already placed a funding deficit in the Ministry of Defense's 10-year plan at nearly £17 billion. sitting there in audited black and white while the transformation was being planned. By October 2025, the Ministry of Defense projected a £2 billion overspend for that financial year alone, and the Defense Investment Plan, the document meant to show exactly how all of this gets paid for, had still not been published as of mid-2026. The government indicated it might appear before the NATO summit in July of that year. Might. Before a summit. Not the kind of language that inspires confidence in detailed financial sequencing. This is the structural context in which the Royal Navy is attempting one of its most significant post-war transformations, not from a position of comfortable surplus, but under fiscal pressure against a delivery timeline with no spare capacity for a threat environment that is not waiting for the paperwork to catch up. So how does the arithmetic actually work? Because the numbers, examined properly, are more interesting than the headlines suggest. UK defence spending is set to reach £62.2 billion in 2025 to 2026, rising to £73.5 billion by 2028 to 2029, and the government has committed to reaching 2.5% of GDP by 2027, with a longer-term ambition of 3.5% on core defence by 2035. That longer-term figure, if it materializes, represents a genuine shift in how Britain prioritizes military capability, the kind of number that changes the procurement calculus in meaningful ways. Treating it as a certainty would be unwise given the competing pressures on public spending. Treating it as a serious signal, though, is entirely reasonable. The submarine program is where the structural ambition of the whole enterprise lives. The 2025 Strategic Defense Review announced plans for up to 12 SSN-AUKUS attack submarines, almost double the 7 Astute class boats currently in service or under construction, at a target build rate of 1 every 18 months. Rolls-Royce builds the nuclear reactors at Rainsway, BAE Systems handles the hull work at Barrow-in-Furness, and the Dreadnought-class ballistic missile submarines are already under construction. The lead boat's keel was laid in March 2025. Britain is running 2 major submarine programs in parallel right now while designing a third, and the industrial base required to sustain that is being rebuilt at pace. Norway's decision in August 2025 to acquire at least 5 Type 26 frigates in a deal worth £10 billion deserves more than a footnote. That is Britain's largest warship export deal on record, and it carries consequences beyond the headline revenue figure. Higher production volume at the Glasgow shipyard building the Type 26 means unit costs come down, and build rates can be maintained more reliably. Export deals are not just income streams. They are industrial policy expressed in contract form, and this one arrived at exactly the moment the program needed the momentum. Forget the formal program documents for a moment, because what the First Sea Lord told an audience at DSEI in September 2025 is more revealing about where this is actually heading. General Sir Gwyn Jenkins described a navy where a single Type 26 frigate deploys not alone, but accompanied by 2 uncrewed escort vessels, extending its sensor reach and providing decoy options. He set a goal of having those uncrewed escorts sailing with the fleet within 2 years of that speech. He also stated his intention to see a collaborative combat drone launch from a Royal Navy carrier by the end of 2026. This is not aspiration for the 2040s. This is the near-term operational concept, running on a timeline measured in months rather than decades. The part of this story that receives insufficient attention in coverage focused on frigate counts is exactly this shift in thinking. The number of hulls matters less when not all of those systems require a crew. The doctrine being written now, around the ships being built now, describes a force where a Type 26 operating with 2 uncrewed escorts represents more total capability than 3 crewed frigates operating on older doctrine. Whether that proves out in operational conditions rather than controlled demonstrations is the open question, and it is a significant one, but the direction of travel is unambiguous. HMS Venturer, the lead Type 31, was launched at Rosyth in June 2025 and is currently in the outfitting phase. By the time it enters service, the doctrine around it will have been substantially rewritten from what existed when the contract was signed in 2019. The ships being constructed now are being built for a concept of operations that has evolved faster than the steel has been cut, which is either concerning or encouraging depending on your appetite for institutional ambition. The Royal Navy appears to have decided it is encouraging. The 6 Type 45 destroyers are being upgraded with 24 additional cells for the Sea Scepter surface-to-air missile system, with that work running from 2026 to 2032. 6 ships stretched across 6 years of upgrade cycles means that at any given point, several of them will be in refit and unavailable for tasking. The ships are real, the missiles are real, and the capability gain at the end of the process is genuine. Availability, though, is never a binary condition. It is a management problem running continuously in the background of every deployment decision, and it rarely appears in the press release announcing the program. One of the 5 Type 31 frigates will carry the name HMS Bulldog, and that name has weight behind it. The original HMS Bulldog was a Second World War destroyer that captured a German submarine in 1941 and recovered, among other materials, an Enigma machine, the codes from which contributed to outcomes shaping the entire course of the war. A warship's name carries its history whether or not everyone aboard knows all of it. Here is the 10% that separates a capable navy from a decisive one, and it is not the ships, not even the submarines. The question is whether Britain can integrate all of these elements faster than the threat continues to evolve. HMS Prince of Wales achieved full operational capability with NATO in November 2025, and for the first time, 24 British F-35Bs operated from a British carrier without American augmentation, a sovereign capability milestone that would have looked optimistic as recently as 5 years before it happened. The carrier exists, the aircraft exist, the trained aircrew exist, and the deployment, which ran across 8 months, proved the concept at operational scale. The question from this point is whether the uncrewed systems, the upgraded destroyers, the new frigates, and the expanded submarine force can all come online and integrate coherently within the same window, because the window is not open indefinitely. Jenkins said something at DSEI worth sitting with for a moment. He said the pace of technological change will never be as slow again as it is today, and that is a deliberately unsettling sentence to deliver to a room full of defense professionals. It means that whatever the Navy builds toward 2030 must have been designed with the assumption that the environment it operates in will keep accelerating. The ships under construction now are not the destination. They are the platform for a kind of adaptation that the service has not historically been structured to run at the pace now being demanded. Britain is spending more on defense than it has in decades, planning more submarines than it has built in a generation, deploying a carrier strike group with genuine sovereign 5th-generation air power, and simultaneously operating its smallest frigate escort force in modern history. All of those things are simultaneously true, and the paradox that opened this video is not resolved by 2030. What happens by 2030 is that it gets managed. The gap closes, the fleet strengthens, and the arithmetic, slowly and expensively, begins to move in Britain's favor. Whether the money materializes at the scale promised, whether the build rates hold against the historical tendency of complex naval programs to slip, whether the uncrewed systems prove their operational value outside demonstration conditions, those remain open questions. The Defense Investment Plan has not been published yet, and that document, whenever it arrives, will tell you more about whether this transformation is real than any speech delivered in front of a warship with good lighting. The SSN-AUKUS program will define British naval power further into this century than most people watching this will live to see play out, and it connects to decisions being made right now in Canberra and Washington as much as in London. That program is its own long story. Stay subscribed if that is the kind of analysis you want covered when it crystallizes. The Royal Navy is not lethal yet. The architecture for a force that is genuinely dangerous, though, is being assembled right now, piece by piece, in the shipyards of Glasgow, Rosyth, and Barrow-in-Furness, by people working against a timeline with very little room for error. Whether it arrives on schedule and at the cost advertised is the only question that actually matters in the end. and anyone who has followed British defense procurement knows exactly how those stories tend to go.